All right, everyone. We're here for the game time with Doc, Lurch, and Greg. This time we do not have Lurch. He had some issues to take care of. But you got me and Greg here today. We're running just a couple minutes late and getting everything going, but such is our life. Let's start off with a sound check and getting the chat monitor going. So go over here, sound check, check 1 2, check 1 2. They're going.
Check 1 2. Check 1 2.
Go over here, sound check, check 1 2, check 1 2. They're going.
Check 1 2. Check 1 2.
Go over here. Oh, nice and clear. Okay, great. And
Excellent.
go ahead and pop out the chat channel so I can see who comes into chat and kind of make it fit its area here. My mouse stopped working. Hold on a second. There we go. Now where did it go? I hate it when a mouse randomly stops working like that. There we go. All right. And we're here now. For those who don't know, we're part of Eclectic Endeavors, the group that brings you the Gaming Arts Media Entertainment Expo and the Picnic at the End of the Universe, a local group. Basically, what we do is we try to further the educational side of these wonderful nerdy hobbies that we're all participants in. The next time for our convention is actually going to be in 2022. Of course, we didn't have one in 2020 or 2021. But on the 14th, 15th, and 16th of October 2022, we will be having our convention again, and it's once again at the Springfield Convention Center, where it's been every year. This will be officially year 12 because the last official one we had was year 11, even though in normal parlance, this would be year 14. But yeah, this will be our 12th year. I hope to get everybody out there. Now, we're going to be running it a little bit different this year in that we're not going to have everything we normally have all available because we just don't have the people to run all the different areas. So if you find that there's an area that's not being covered that you're really interested in, volunteer to run that area, and we'll bring you in. Our meetings are open to the public, and we're always looking for new volunteers to help out with things. Like an example of areas that could still use coverage. So right now we're not having them is the costume contests or the art contest. The art contest and costume contest do not have anybody to run them right now. So if you know somebody really interested in running one of those things, get them to one of our meetings. Or if you just want to volunteer to be a henchman, henchmen really are what make the convention happen. If it wasn't for our henchmen, we just could not do all the things that we try to do at game. So definitely check that out. For game itself, I am the cross promotions manager as well as panel director this year. My co-host today, Greg, is our director of tabletop gaming, and he kind of handles a lot of our media stuff too, our website and everything, keeping updates on social media going, and tracking the website and stuff. And then our absentee host, Lurch, Philip Landergan, is co-chairman this year, along with Chris Stewart, who's been the chairman pretty much for most of the existence of the game. And then he's also director of electronic gaming. So he's our absolute guru on console games especially. He's really a big console gamer. Since he's not here this week, obviously we're not going to cover a whole lot of console games this week. In fact, I don't think there's anything on the console horizon for today. But that's okay. We've had a lot of shows where we wouldn't necessarily have Greg. This time we don't have Lurch, so we're going to do it a little bit differently. I'm going to cover some my media from the vault stuff with some extra material this week. This is mostly what I've got. However, we're not going to go and do our update on the Supergirl series finale because I don't want to do that without Lurch here. And even if he'd have made it here today, he would not have had time to watch the 2-part finale that for us aired today because we wait to watch it on streaming, and it actually aired last night. But this will give people a whole other week to catch up before we start talking about it next week. And next week we don't have Greg because Greg will be at Holdfast Brewing Company, so we can make it more about the media stuff next week than we have been. Also, just to let people know, starting at the beginning of the year, Greg will be leaving us. His schedule is getting pretty full up with things to do. No fault. He's always welcome to come back and guest host. And I think he's still going to be doing Holdfast on every third Wednesday, but he's going to be taking a break from Game Time at the beginning of the year. And, of course, Game Time itself is taking a break the month of December for the holidays and for the fact that I'm trying to move and everything else that's going on. So we've only got basically a couple actually I think 2 more episodes. And that's it, because we got next week. Then we got the one right before Thanksgiving.
The 17th, the 14th, the 17th, the 24th, and then, the next Wednesday is the first day of December.
Yeah. So we've only really got, other than today, 2 more episodes, one of which Greg will be over at Holdfast. And we're going to kind of wrap up for 2021 here the day before Thanksgiving. So it'll be our Giving Thanks episode. We still have a lot to give thanks for in the gaming community. For all of us that did weather COVID and are still around, that's an important thing for us. And so we're really thankful for that. And we will be going forward from there. I'm going to go ahead and get us started on our topics now, though, and Greg will start us off this time with something from the Morris's Unofficial. Mimics. Oh, an article on mimics, one of my favorite creatures.
Oh, then you might want to back this Kickstarter. The Kickstarter isn't open yet, but it looks like a very small project. In fact, when I was reading the text, this reminded me of the Kickstarter that you brought up sometime earlier, the $1 dungeons or something like that.
Right.
Yeah. It appears to be it's once the Kickstarter launches, according to the article, there's actually going to be 2 pages, one for mimics and one for gelatinous cubes, which I think that'll be just as fun. What's interesting about them is their fold. They're on basically double-sized paper. They had the dimensions here. Roughly 29 inches by 22 inches, but it's a map fold, so that you can fold the whole thing up, and it's like a 4x6 index card sized pamphlet, basically, that you can stick in your pocket. And there's going to be encounter options for both creatures. The other thing that really caught me about this article was the very tongue-in-cheek sense of humor of it. Philip Reed apparently also works with Steve Jackson Games. Okay. So if you're familiar with Munchkin, you know the kind of sense of humor.
Well, plus GURPS
that we're dealing with.
You know, GURPS is also Steve Jackson Games. Yeah. For big art role players.
Yeah. To wit, the first question and response in the article from the interviewer, Egg Embry. Should we even discuss your new project on Kickstarter? Will it create things of value? To which Reed responds, I suspect everyone would be a lot happier if we spent our time talking about the original Unearthed Arcana and how it features the strangest polearm fish this size of the Middle Ages. As to creating value, I can honestly say I've never made anything of value in my entire life. What I can promise, though, is that my latest project is the most worthless endeavor of my career.
For those who don't fully get the
He's
joke,
he's almost overselling himself by underselling himself.
Yeah, right. It's self-deprecating humor, and I love it. It's kind of funny because for those who weren't around for the first Unearthed Arcana's release, I was. In the back of the book, there was actually a picture of basically all the medieval types of polearms along the bottom of a double page in the book. So that's what they were talking about with being a fetish about polearms. And almost nobody in D&D ever really uses most of the polearms. So that's another thing. But
I love polearms. I love the idea of polearms. I've seen a ton of museums. The variety is fascinating, but there's always a mechanically better weapon, it seems. I do know that among certain members of Role Playing Public Radio, friend podcast, also based in Springfield, there's a running gag about a specific type of polearm called a Bohemian ear spoon. Is that right?
That sounds right. The Bohemian ear spoon?
Yeah. The Bohemian ear spoon. It's spelled exactly as it sounds.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a real thing.
Well, yeah, there are so many different types of
polearms.
And that one was not in, just to let you know, that was not in that Unearthed Arcana, because I remember all the polearms.
Well, then what are we even doing here?
I know. Hey, we said it's one
Can't
of the most
have a Bohemian ear spoon.
I know. The most exotic one I think they had was the Lucerne hammer, actually.
Which didn't a version of that actually make it into the D&D core book?
Not the Lucerne one.
The Lucerne hammer sounds familiar.
Yeah, but it's in the Unearthed Arcana for first edition, and that's I think the last time it was actually officially mentioned. Although I think it's listed under one of the describer text on the generic polearms possibilities that you could make it as that polearm, but it didn't have its own individual heading anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But
I digress.
We digress. It's still kind of funny. I love the self-deprecating humor that he's using, and especially when you think of Steve Jackson games and Munchkin and GURPS. Humor is a huge part of their design philosophy. Even though GURPS can be played as a 100% serious game.
Oh yeah, I played it once using the After the Bomb rules, or campaign setting, I guess.
Yeah, GURPS is great because it is literally a generic universal role-playing system that doesn't pretend to be anything but a generic universal role-playing system. It's actually, is exactly what it's pretending to be. And
on the other hand, its skill list is exhausting.
Well, yeah, because they're trying to make it generic and universal, which means you've got some skills that come with each era or subgenre that you're trying to insert into the game. And there's so many mix and matches of the different books you can use in order to produce the campaign you are. One of the best things I ever did a campaign with GURPS for was a time travel campaign similar to like a Doctor Who or a Stargate or something like that type of campaign, because you got the rules for all the different genres and stuff that you might pop into. It also works really good for planetary exploration games, because each planet could be based around a different kind of genre subset. So it works really good for alternate dimensions, alternate timelines, or anytime you want to fuse a couple of different genres together that you don't normally think would go together. But humor really makes it go down easy. It's that spoonful of sugar that helps the medicine go down, as it were. To quote Mary Poppins.
Yeah. The Kickstarter hasn't opened yet, but if you're on Kickstarter, you can have them notify you by email when it starts, like everything else in Kickstarter. I haven't looked at his previous work yet, which was called Tome of Skulls.
Right.
But as small as this folds down to, I have a hunch the physical Kickstarter level is not going to be more than $5 for a front and back print plus shipping, obviously. But
For
as small as this thing is, basically,
for both cards, yeah.
yeah.
And they call it the Jiggly and
As
Wiggly
small as this
Cube.
thing is, basically index card size, you could mail it in a regular envelope. So I imagine shipping not being too bad an issue even in these times.
Yeah, or print on demand. Uh, they could do
Also, yeah.
some kind of print on demand. I love it how they call the gelatinous cube the Jiggly and Wiggly Cube. What is that damn sliggly cube doing? The humor here is great. That's fantastic. One of the first um, April Fools issues of Dragon magazine, because they started a tradition in Dragon magazine of coming out with a April Fool's bestiary every year, and one of the first ones was based on the gelatinous cube. One of the creatures was uh, the gelatinous cube. It was basically flavored fruit jelly cubes based on the kids' lunches and stuff. And I always remember that whenever I think of the gelatinous cube. Gelatinous cubes can actually be really nasty characters to deal with. And some games have handled them really well in like electronic gaming, and some games just are terrible at it. But I do know when I play EverQuest and the gelatinous cube shows up and it's like rolling from one facing to the other with the little skulls and skeletons and stuff stuck inside its semi-transparent thing. It looks really sharp. I love that. It's a great little spoofy monster character that it's in the oozes, slimes, and jellies family of creatures. And actually, I think the mimic got reclassified as that too at one point, because it's polymorphic. It's
That
more,
kind of makes sense, but it really makes more sense as an aberration.
yeah.
Uh,
But at one point, I
but
think
yeah,
it was also that because it was polymorphic, but it wasn't polymorphic because it magically transformed into things, but because its entire structure was more like a single cell organism that could adapt, kind of like Odo from Deep Space Nine.
and as you described the creature, I was looking back, going, I know there's been other oozes illustrated in the various monster manuals that have had remains suspended in them, but it's always a very pronounced thing on the gelatinous cube. You never see a gelatinous cube that doesn't have remains, that doesn't have food still digesting, and
Well,
most
yeah.
other oozes don't get that treatment.
Well, because in a dark corridor, if they don't have any remains floating, they're nigh on invisible too. So, because you don't see the remains, which is one of the few telltale things to tell you, oh, wait a minute, there's something there. Okay. Well, so we'll be looking to see when this. Did you say when the Kickstarter was supposed to launch?
It didn't say when. There's just a notification on the Kickstarter page that you can click to get
Let you
reminded.
know. Okay. All right. Well, we're going to go ahead then and move on to our next thing, and this will be one of my from the vault things, because all but one of my things is going to be from the vault. Kind of, well, media related, not necessarily from the vault, but media related. And the first one is the movie Hackers. Now, if you've been in this sub community, Hackers is probably one of your favorite old classic movies if you've had a chance to watch it. One of the first appearances a lot of people had of Angelina Jolie and Matthew Lillard, which are, of course, great members of our entertainment community that like to serve the nerdier genre type movies. Also, little known fact, a lot of people, the main character who's Dade, or Crash Override, or Zero Cool, as he's known in the movie, those are his two hacker handles. A lot of people wonder where has he been, and a lot of people don't make the connection. But if you watch the TV show Elementary with Lucy Liu, the main character of Sherlock is actually Dade. It's Crash Override, all grown up. I mean, we all know where Angelina Jolie is now. She's doing anything and everything. Her newest movie, The Eternal, just came out. And Matthew Lillard is, constantly doing stuff. A lot of his time, actually, right now, has been spent with his separate company creating D&D supplements because he's a big-time D&D fan. And so he makes more expanded, high-end versions of some of the campaigns that come out. So that's what he's been doing lately while still doing movies. Now, I'm not sure about all the other actors in the movies. A lot of them have fallen off or died or whatever. But the main ones, which I think of as Angelina Jolie, Matthew Lillard, and what's the guy's name? You could tell me better than I could. Johnny Lee is the one that everybody's wondering about. Johnny Lee pretty much fell off the face of the earth for a lot of people, but he's actually Sherlock Holmes, and he does a great job of that role too.
Big fan right here. Big fan.
Yeah, big fan. Yeah, Alison is a huge fan, and she knew it right away. I mean, she watched Elementary quite religiously too. Because he was Sherlock, she watched it. I kind of liked Lucy Liu as Watson. That was kind of a different take on things. But at the time, there was so many different Sherlocks out there because we had the Downey Jr. Sherlock, we had Cumberbatch Sherlock, we had.
It was Elementary because in the UK they wouldn't let them. You know how we're always taking UK.
Yeah.
They wouldn't let us take it.
Right.
They wouldn't let us.
Yeah, it was called Elementary instead of Sherlock because the UK's version of Sherlock was out with Cumberbatch.
No, we couldn't copy what they did.
And we couldn't copy what they did. Yeah.
We could watch it, but we couldn't copy it.
So.
Like we like to do that, like the office.
Even though they couldn't stop us because it's in public domain. Because it's Arthur Conan Doyle, his entire works are all in public domain. Anybody can use them.
But we couldn't do it the same way they did.
Yeah, not the exact same way. No. Right. Got a little side conversation going here. But yeah, I just finished watching it. I watched it like twice today because I kind of fell asleep through one. I tripped and jarred my shoulder last night, and so I hadn't slept all night. I didn't even go to dialysis treatment this morning because I was in so much pain. I was nauseous. And we all know how easy I get nauseous lately anyway. But pain just makes it worse. And so the first time I watched it, I fell asleep, so I had to go back and watch it again. But it's Hackers. You can watch it dozens of times and turn around and run it one more time. Why not? It's just such a great movie. It's fun. And its image of hackers is so off from how hackers really see things because the screen does not get that big three-dimensional view of a digital landscape or anything. It's code. We see screens and screens of the code, but it's not interesting to just look at screens and screens of code. So when they did the Hackers movie, they created this whole digital landscape out of like Tron or something like that, and it looks like they're all, navigating through this Tronscape when they go in and hack. And really a lot of that is visually in their heads. And so people who weren't hackers, like during the time Hackers came out, I would have been counted as a hacker. So I knew exactly what they were going through. But a lot of people didn't. Hacking wasn't as completely in vogue everywhere. But I was from Southern California where it was probably one of the biggest movements there was. And so it gave a completely different image of Hackers. But it was just a fun movie all the way around. The characters were all great. Matthew Lillard's character especially. I'd said a few episodes ago that my favorite character probably ever played was from 13 Ghosts. but this is my second favorite, Serial Killer. And I love it when he gets first introduced to Serial Killer. You know, Fruit Loops, but he actually knows stuff. That's what the Phantom Freak says when he introduces him to Dade, to Crash Override, which is the handle he's using as a adult since he turned 18. But he was zero cool when he was 11-year-old and crashed 1,507 systems, including the stock exchange. Pretty impressive hack, if you ask me.
If only it were that simple.
Right? Well, back then, if you could crash one system, you could crash a bunch of them. But that's why they actually did do stuff like put down that they couldn't do now, but they laid down a lot of laws where they had no access to computers or touch-tone phones or anything. Now they couldn't do that because it would stunt a student's ability to go to school right now. I mean, almost all homework and stuff is done on the computer nowadays, so they'd have to have some access to computers. And who doesn't have a cell phone in their pocket anymore? But back then, they'd order kids that were caught hacking and stuff to have no access to computers or anything till they became an adult and supposedly more responsible. Supposedly. More or less, not at all. Who knows? Anyway, so that's my big one for this week for the Vault, and I think it's one that most of us nerds can really get behind. But we're going to go into Greg's next topic. Greg has quite a few this week, so he's carrying the show, but that's okay. We go enough without him that it's nice to have a Greg featured show, especially when he's getting ready to leave us. So next is Jacob Impact's social commentary into class war.
Yeah.
Okay.
Class War is the name of the game. The Kickstarter is already available, and the going rate for a single copy of the game is going to be $35. I hadn't heard of this publisher before. I don't know if Jacobin is the publisher or just a magazine title, but they're a socialist leftist magazine that tends to focus specifically on economic socialism, and they've launched what appears to be their first Kickstarter for a game. It's interesting to see a periodical branch out like that, but with the COVID boom in tabletop game sales, I guess they were looking to take advantage of that.
Right.
It's a two-player. They're calling it a two-player asymmetric strategy game. So I'm immediately thinking of, coincidentally, Watergate, a game themed after the Watergate scandal, where one player plays the newspaper and the other plays the Nixon administration. Based on the imagery and what little they describe of the actual game mechanics, it looks like there's a pool of dice that different cards generates, and the cost of playing those cards. I do know the Kickstarter page that the worker side, red side, has 9 dice, and the other side, the corporate business side, has 6 dice. And there seem to be thematic differences in how they generate those dice to throw and somehow score points against the other player. I imagine one's going to be more of an engine building game. One side is going to be more engine building, whereas the other could be one of those gotcha systems where you try to take control of your opponent's resources. It reminds me a little bit of Root, actually, which was not 2-player, but still.
The first thing I thought of when I saw that corporate card was Illuminati.
Artistically, that may be some inspiration.
Yeah, because
I played that once years ago. That was a good game.
Yeah, I loved Illuminati. That's one of
That was
those on my list to get.
that was also Steve Jackson, wasn't it?
No, Yeah. Actually, I think Illuminati was Steve Jackson.
Yeah, I think so.
But yeah, Steve Jackson produced a lot of card and board games in addition to their GURPS role playing games. So it's hard to sometimes.
The social commentary is not veiled. It's not thinly veiled. It's just not veiled. There's cards referencing specific people in the public, like there's a worker card named Bernie Feathers instead of Bernie Sanders. There's a corporate card named Nelson Rockefeller, which
Nelson
is
Rockefeller,
alligator suit.
right?
Yeah.
Rocky fella.
Right, Rockefeller is Rockefeller. Yeah, I see that.
And the article goes on to give a brief overview of the history of activism in the tabletop gaming industry. More recently, people like Brenda Romero creating games whose mechanics drive a certain awareness of how the world works, and going as far back as the original Monopoly,
Right.
which this game cites in the very first sentence of their Kickstarter, actually.
Yeah, it kind of reminded me of something I got in the mail, actually, that I'm moving over to be something to talk about today, too. So while you're talking, moving something around from another
Oh, sure.
of one of those kind of more controversial game companies. You'll recognize it once I bring it up, I'm sure. But
it sounds like the game's already done. The estimated delivery is January 2022, so either it sounds like they've got the game finished already and maybe even have a printer lined up, like get all their ducks in a row. Which, if they're a periodical company, they're probably used to this kind of planning and maybe even these kind of supply line issues.
Doing their own printing, yeah.
Yeah. My only concern with the game, and this was reflected even in the Kickstarter's own comment section, was that the design team and development team appears to be just the magazine team. There's nothing referencing a specific game company or individual game designer. And one person who brought it up in the comments even suggested, like, Antoine Bauza, who's done a lot of good games, but as far as two-player games, did Seven Wonders Duel.
And the name of the game is Class War, right?
Yeah, Indica. At the top of the article, yeah, Jacobin is the magazine that is kickstarting the game. Class War is the name of the game that they're building on Kickstarter.
And their article is social commentary on Class War.
Okay. Yeah. Now, I don't think that there's going to be, if there aren't already, there's not going to be any professional career game development advisors, because if they want to hit a release date of January of next year, that's only 2 months away, then they've already had this project on lock. They're just collecting the money to execute it.
And they may have some silent advisors that just not putting their name on it. They're just giving them advice.
That could be.
See how it goes first, because unfortunately, the leftist kind of socialist thing can get some bad flack. So some people might be real cautious to put their name directly to something
and has
this and outspoken. I mean, some will revel in it and do that. I mean, they'll ask to put my name on it. Can I endorse this? But there's others that will be like a little cautious because they don't want it to affect other products they have on the market.
I could see that. And even there's a line indicating, like, Jacobin has been working with industry insiders, but there's no indication whatsoever. So We'll see. I really want to back it on principle, but I kind of want to know that it's a good or even interesting game. And I've read the Kickstarter page. I haven't watched the promo video yet, but it's fairly light on details as to how the game actually plays, except for the win condition.
Yeah, and
So I'm not sure.
I only back one project a year generally, and I backed the Alchemy Dungeon app project earlier in the year, and then I did finally break down and back the Level Up Advanced D&D project, basically as my early backing for next year. So I probably won't have another backing next year. But we'll see. I mean, sometimes something is so good you just want to be on the history books as being one of the backers for it. And
But yeah, the Kickstarter campaign page is live, so check that out if you want more information.
right,
But that's the long and the short of that.
right. And looks like the kitty has come up to say hi. He's just out of eyesight there. Hi, kitty. Hey, kitty. He's jumped up on my lap. He's like, "Hi, daddy." But they have a tendency to do that, especially when you're busy doing something else. That's when they want your attention the most. Okay.
Yep.
Next on my list is another one from the flashbacks. This one's from the vault. Is Stargate with James Spader and Kurt Russell. Now, you want to talk about a movie franchise that spun off into several TV series and had some great star power behind it. Stargate is definitely one of those. Of course, Kurt Russell's in the first Stargate. James Spader played the professor that knew mostly about the hieroglyphs and pictographs and stuff. So he was basically your archaeological expert. And it spun off into the original Stargate TV show, which starred the original MacGyver, which for some reason I can't think of his name right now. But it also had Amanda Tapping in it, and it had the spin-off Stargate Atlantis, and we had another Stargate. I don't remember what it was called, but Stargate. They had unearthed this giant stone wheel, for lack of a better term, that basically allowed them to dial in some coordinates using hieroglyphs, special pictographs that just not just anybody could decipher, but James Spader's character can. And it opens a rift between Earth and other outposts in space that was developed by the I know I'm going to pronounce it the Goa'uld, I think is what they were pronounced as, but they were basically the basis for our Egyptian mythology. They were an advanced alien culture that basically we worshipped like the Egyptian gods, and their armor. They were human in their armor, but their armor overlay, the headpieces and stuff, were the animal headpieces that we're used to for the animal-headed gods of Egyptian faith. So that way they kind of blended it really well in that storytelling mechanism to bring it all together. And humans were basically a slave race, which kind of made sense because the Goa'uld enslaved the humans, and then the humans enslaved other humans to build the temples to the Goa'uld, and everybody praised the pharaoh, and the pharaoh was a god king, and so the pharaoh could have been a Goa'uld at the time, and so on. And it was just a really fun adventure, very Indiana Jones esque with the whole archaeology bent, but in space. So it's like Indy in space, with Kurt Russell playing the part of Harrison Ford. He's the military expert that goes on the mission to basically shut down the Stargate and try to make sure that Earth is not on the menu of places that people can just show up at through the Stargate. But
Which platform is that on right now? I haven't seen that movie in at least 20 years.
it is on one of the Amazon Prime ones. It's either on Amazon Prime
Prime?
itself or Amazon Prime through Paramount Plus. It's one or the other. Because I get my
Okay.
Paramount Plus through Amazon Prime. So I get some of that stuff. Hackers is also on Paramount Plus. So if you've got Paramount Plus, then you should have access to it. If you just have Amazon Prime, you still may have access to it. I'm not sure if it's a Paramount only or if it's all of Amazon. If it's all of Amazon, it may or may not have commercials because it could be IMDb, in which case it'll have commercials in it. Hey, what's up, Geek Guitar?
That'd be a good one to review.
Yep, Kitty likes pets. What's a good one to review? What would be a good one to review?
That movie, to watch it again after so long.
Oh yeah, it's absolutely worth it. That's why I bring up the Vault movies.
It's a classic.
And Geek Guitar joined us. He says Kitty likes pets. Yes, Kitty thinks he's a parrot. That's why he goes up on my shoulder. And this is a great movie to start with, and it's really nice of you to say. Geekatard said this is his favorite stream of the week. So that makes me feel pretty warm inside. I like that. Anyway, so that's my other big from the vault recommendation is Stargate. So we've got two really good from the vault recommendations this week instead of just one. Hackers, for the more down to earth, computer hacker fun, conspiracy theorist / romantic comedy adventure saga thing, and then we got Stargate for a little bit more science fiction, space travel, and even some Greek mythology. Stargate is definitely a good movie to start with. It's on Amazon Prime's Paramount Plus. I'm not sure if Amazon Prime has it exclusively or if Paramount Plus has it, because I get my Paramount Plus through my Amazon Prime. But Stargate is totally worth it. It spun off into a couple of TV shows. It had some sequel movies, but the first movie with Kurt Russell and James Spader is still the best. And then the TV series spin-off featured the guy that played MacGyver in the original MacGyver. Still can't think of his name right now. It's free on Prime, so it's on Prime. Geek Guitar just checked it out, so you should be good to go too, Greg.
Excellent.
Yeah, and I try to pick stuff that's on Prime or Tubi or Hulu or something. Right now, I'm not doing things off of Netflix because I don't currently have Netflix, and I try not to do too much on Disney, just because I know there's not a whole bunch of people out there that have Disney right now, because they don't have a currently running Marvel series. They're kind of in betweens again, although I do have Disney. But we're going to go ahead and move on from here. What's Greg's Twitch? Okay, Greg's Twitch is Queen City Cardboard.
Mm-hmm. All one
Oh
word.
yeah, all one word. Yeah, your Verizon offers Disney Plus. Yeah, my T-Mobile Sprint offers Hulu. So Hulu's the one I get for free. I pay for Disney, and when there's not a currently running series, I'm usually kind of very tempted to discontinue Disney. I just didn't do it this time. Uh, Partly because we're going into the holidays, and Disney has some pretty decent holiday stuff to watch. Uh, and by the time I got it stopped now, the next thing would start up again, and so I'd have to start it all over. So, yeah, I've got my Disney Plus going right now. I just don't do a whole lot of recommendations from the vault to Disney. Although I will tell you that Hocus Pocus, which I recommended a couple of weeks ago during our Halloween thing, was a Disney recommendation. And they are
And
working on
Disney
that
Plus has
sequel.
a pretty consistent. They don't really have a cycle of their releases. Everything they own is just there. Anything that's Disney or Touchstone is just right
Yeah,
there.
yeah. They unfortunately they don't add as much new stuff as some of the other ones do on a regular basis. But they do have some new kind of series adaptations and stuff they've been adding. So like they have did the series for Turner and Hooch. That was really good.
Oh yeah.
I loved that. The TV series is excellent. If you haven't had a chance to watch it, definitely watch it. It's cute, and it's kind of the main character who's the guy who played Josh from Drake and Josh. I think somebody said.
Hmm.
I never watched it, but Allison I think told me that was Josh. But he's actually Tom Hanks's character's son, and yeah, Josh Bell, and he's a federal marshal, not just a regular police officer, but he gets his own version of Hooch to cause kind of lots of trouble, and also get him out of trouble. So yeah, that's another one that's good to watch. Anyway, we're going to get off of this right now. Go on to Greg's next topic, um, and in this case, it's the Adventure Zone with the guest DM Abria Liongar.
Ian Gar, I think.
Ian Gar. Okay.
Yeah.
Let me close
Otherwise known as Quiddy. She's on Twitter and Instagram a lot lately, it seems. Probably has been for a while. I just don't keep up with that kind of stuff. But she's been taking the actual play world by storm. She was the GM most recently, I think, for the Critical Role miniseries,
the Tales of Exandria.
Exandria.
Yeah.
Yeah, which was
Exandria
excellent.
Unlimited or something. Yeah. And they took, like I said, 3
she's
characters
played
from that into the new season.
She played and at one point GM'd briefly for a miniseries on Dimension 20, which is normally run by Brennan Mulligan, who's done a lot of work for College Humor. Good improv artist, excellent sense of humor. And now she's completing what some people are referring to as the Holy Trinity of actual play. As a temporary host for not just for the Adventure Zone podcast, which has been running in various settings and systems for 3 years now, but as the GM for a mini-series going back to Adventure Zone's original campaign setting, the Bureau of Balance, which
Nice.
is a spin on the Forgotten Realms campaign setting.
Nice. And it's nice because I watched
The
a couple of her
original
Exandria episodes. She was really, really good as a DM. It's nice to see her
Yeah, she knows how to handle the...
branching out.
Yeah, I've already watched the trailer video, which should be embedded in that comic book article. And she's sharp. She's working to keep the players in line. I'm looking forward to see what not Griffin. Or the McElroys. Oh god, I can't remember all of a sudden.
One of the McElroys?
No, it was Griffin. Griffin was the GM for the original series.
Mm.
But he's going to be in the player seat now, so I wonder if he's going to play. No spoilers if you haven't seen the podcast. It's one of my favorite. Adventure Zone is to me what Critical Role is to most tabletop, most RPG enthusiasts. But once they finished that series, they branched out and did a number of other things. They stuck with D&D 5th edition for a while, but then they moved on to things like they used Monster of the Week to do a kind of Appalachian fantasy horror game. They've used Fate System. They've used a bunch of different systems over time.
Well, that's cool.
So there's... I would be... If it was anybody other than Abria, Iyengar, or like Matt Mercer, then I'd be trepidatious about them returning to such a beloved setting and storyline, especially with the McElroys playing their original characters from the original podcast, Taco, Magnus, and Merle. But I don't have a doubt that she'll be able to handle it. And it'll be a mini-series. The article says it's only going to be 3 episodes, but it's also going to be on video, not just podcast, pure audio format. So we'll actually get to see the reactions as well as hear them.
So, like Critical Role.
I bet it'll be a ton of fun.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, because more and more people are going away from the pure podcast and going towards the Twitch broadcast now, or the YouTube broadcast, where they can take the audio and put it up as a podcast. But then there's also the Twitch broadcast that they can watch on Twitch or go to YouTube and watch the reruns of. Yep. And it's just kind of, that's the big thing. And she was, like I said, she was just a phenomenal GM, I thought, when she did the Critical Role. And it's really hard for Matt to give up his seat to anybody as a guest DM just out of hand. He doesn't just give up his seat. I mean, yeah, he'll let any of his players take a guest spot for a while, but he doesn't just hand his seat over to just anybody else. I think he's handed it over to Ivan Van Norman a couple of times. And
that's what I thought. I thought it had been mostly Mercer.
Matt Mercer's been the one that's run the shows. He's done, and then he's let his individual players run some 1 and 2 shots. But Matt usually controls that DM's seat over there on Critical Role. And since all the Critical Role people are like co-owners of the franchise, they can all take the seat if they want at some point. But Matt is usually what they would call their primary DM, and he doesn't let outsiders in just out of hand. He's more likely to let an outsider come in and be a guest player than a guest DM, which means he doesn't get a whole lot of chances to play. But he played when Abria was running.
Borrowed the chair.
Yeah, borrowed the chair. And that was nice to see as well. I do love it when I do get to see Matt Mercer play, because if anything, he's as phenomenal a player as he is a DM. He brings that same kind of energy and dedication to character in to being a player, and he only has to focus on one player, one character at that time. So it's a nice way for him to go into things.
Mm-hmm. And Abria's been riding the momentum for that ever since. And I have no doubt that this miniseries is going to be excellent, considering who's at the helm and who's playing. I mean, besides the Adventure Zone podcast itself, the brothers do a podcast called My Brother and Me. Justin and his wife, who is a general practitioner doctor, do a podcast called Sawbones. And Clint, the father of the 3, is I don't know if he's still active, but he had a career in radio announcing. So we
Do,
have a family of performers.
do they do the Dungeons and Dragons Brothers podcast too?
I don't know.
Because I know I've been seeing some adverts for that in some of my D&D groups. So I thought they might be involved with that. It's like Brothers in D&D or the D&D Brotherhood or something to that nature. Okay, well, we're going to go ahead and end this topic for
Mhm.
now. And let's see, what do I have as my next topic? Okay, this actually started today, so I haven't even had a chance to watch it yet. But I wanted to give a heads up for people who are fans of the classic Clifford cartoon. The big red
Mhm.
dog, Clifford. Um, Paramount Plus has a made for their network movie out that came out today on Paramount Plus, where you can watch Clifford the Big Red Dog. And it's on my list of the next thing I want to watch. But I wanted to give a heads up, because we all like to watch like live action versions of Garfield and Tom and Jerry and Woody Woodpecker and Yogi Bear, just to see kind of how they're going to adapt them to real life, or like when they did the Flintstones with John Goodman, and those are great little adaptations. Here's another one for the books. It's Clifford the Big Red Dog, which was just a dog. Started out as a normal puppy, except he had red fur instead of a more natural colored fur, and he kept growing and growing and growing. And a line from the preview is, how big do you think he's going to get? Is well, he'll get as big as you love him, or something. I'm paraphrasing, and I guess the child loved that dog a lot more than expected, because the dog gets to be about the size of a house, you know. And so it's going to be an interesting one to watch. It's just a really cute thing. Get you in the. It's not a holiday movie, but it gets you in the mood for that family, familial kind of thing. And in fact, it's perfect, I think, for the month of November, when we're looking at Thanksgiving and lightheartedness without always necessarily a religious backdrop to everything. That's enough, Kitty. You're scratching me too much. Yeah, yeah. So I thought I'd just put a heads up here for that one, but this is just a real quick heads up because I haven't watched it myself. It literally just dropped today. Um, and if I hadn't fallen asleep on Hackers the first time, I might have watched Clifford. But instead, I had to watch Hackers again. Sue me. Uh, but maybe next week I can talk a little bit about the actual movie in our more media focused episode with Lurch. But it's something cute, and it goes back to our childhood. Everything from our childhood is getting getting made into movies. Transformers, and they're looking at rebooting a bunch of our old favorite series again. Like there's supposed to be a work on a Silverhawks project. They've rebooted the Thundercats a couple times. The Masters of the Universe reboot is on Netflix. Animaniacs reboot. Um, so it's just something to revisit. There's, of course, was it Garfield is being done by Chris Pratt, and of course the original
They're
live
doing a
action
new
Gar.
one.
That's what I hear. And the original was Bill Murray did the voice of Garfield. But I've heard that Pratt is supposed to be doing voice, and he's getting some guff about it. But who knows? He might be able to do a really good one. I have not seen any official notices about that. I just know that that's one of the things that he gets kind of some guff about. The other one is him being Mario from the Mario Brothers.
I was about to say, he's already Star-Lord and Mario. How much of the nerdosphere can he take up?
Everything he can, because he's also
He's
in
at this rate, he's
Jurassic
going to get
Park
bigger
too.
than. At this rate, he's going to get bigger than Ryan Reynolds.
I mean, he's in Jurassic World too. So he's Jurassic World, Star-Lord, Mario, now Garfield. I mean, if he plays Link in a Zelda movie, we know that he's gotten the whole thing going.
Although, looking at hearing his voice in my head and looking at the Garfield rendering, I see it.
Yeah,
I think he can do it. No problem.
I think he'd be an interesting choice for Link, even though that was a joke. I think he could pull it off, but then again, so could Ryan Reynolds. And Ryan Reynolds just recently announced that he's going to be taking a little bit of a break. He's going to be a little bit more picky, choosy about what he works on because he wants to have a little bit more time for family. But
Fair enough.
Even then, he's involved with some of the big franchises. I mean, that Free Guy was amazing. Deadpool, you can't imagine anybody else playing Deadpool.
No.
So Ryan Reynolds is pretty solid in his particular niche. But yeah, Pratt has got a pretty good stake in these kind of things too now. So it'll be interesting to see as the years go forward what all we start to encounter. Let's see now. We're going to go ahead and go on to your next subject. This was only really meant to be a quick heads up. But what we got here? Digital Wingspan finally alights on Android devices today.
Yeah, I just looked this up on my own phone. It's $10 for the game, but considering that there's local and online play available, that's not too bad a deal. This apparently just dropped. The game itself is about 2 years old. Elizabeth Hargrave designed this, not set taking, but bird collecting game where you score points along a variety of metrics. But the board game itself includes beautiful illustrations of all these actual species of birds throughout North America, and if you get the expansions, also Europe and Oceania, with some ecological information on each bird species. So a real labor of love for, say, if you're a member of the Audubon Society, or just like going for a good stroll on a nice day and just watching the birds.
An ornithopter. I can't even pronounce it right now. But a
Ornithologist.
Ornithologist. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're big into...
She also...
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I'll say if you're big into ornithology, it'd be an interesting game to play, that's for sure. Or if you wanted to teach it to a young one.
And I'd hardly consider myself an ornithologist or even a bird aficionado, but I just find them beautiful animals. And the illustrations really catch that without overtly ripping off the John Audubon artistic style. It gives that same very naturalistic experience. The game just released on mobile devices, as the headline says. I skimmed through the comments for the app a little bit just to see what people thought of it. It's getting high marks. The only consistent complaint I've seen has been the size of the text. Like, if you look at some of those screenshots, if you're trying to play that on an iPhone or what have you, that's going to be a hell of a thing to read. It's certainly better played on an iPad or a larger tablet, but the designers did respond, and they have implemented a larger font size. I don't know if that's fixed the issue, but it's nice to know that there's not just that they put the game out there, but that there's also feedback.
And they're listening.
Mm-hmm. The
Right.
game was praised for its ability to set the mood. There's background music that's very naturalistic, and there's even bird calls played intermittently in the background, almost like you're
Nice.
standing in a glen trying to find these birds.
Like a bird watcher. Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting bit of trivia. If you were ever a fan of Criminal Minds, in the first 2 seasons, Mandy Patinkin played Jason Gideon, and Jason Gideon's obsession was birds. He loved, collecting birds, imprints of birds, but especially he loved the mockingbird. Although he had a study of lots of different birds, and they were involved even in the last case where it was Gideon was dead, and he wasn't even actually in the series, but the case itself linked up to a small blue bird. So it was a little side part of the character that a lot of people would have just brushed off. But me, I'm a little obsessive with some of my favorite characters, especially anybody Mandy Patinkin played. That I always found that kind of an interesting personality trait of his. So you'd probably love a game like this.
Yeah, and there's been enough good digital adaptations. I know it was shaky at first, trying to translate all the information that a board game conveys into that digital format, especially if you're trying to play online. But iteration after iteration, the industry has been catching up. Dicebreaker, embedded in that article, Dicebreaker did a 5 best digital board game adaptations. Wingspan was among those top 5. The others were Splendor, Gloomhaven, Ticket to Ride, and Railroad Inc. All of which I played, all of which are fantastic. I think the Railroad Inc. app would be a good purchase, because I think that would be a good solo game.
I can't stand Ticket to Ride. It's always been on my least favorite list. But Splendor is on one of my favorites, and I've got all the expansions for Splendor. I guess I don't like the railroad simulators as much for some reason. They just don't appeal to me. So Railroad Inc. probably wouldn't either. But
maybe Splendor, it's a wildly different game than Ticket. But if that's not your thing, then
hurrah. Then there's other games I'm not real big on either, like in electronic gaming. I'm not big on shooters, so I don't do that. Now I'm going to let you take over for just a minute because I've got to run to the bathroom. So I'm going to go ahead and jump. Did you have another? I think you had another topic.
I've got one more, I believe.
Yeah. Yep. Blades in the Dark.
This one's not long, but it's also another Dicebreaker article. If you're not familiar with the Blades in the Dark, it's a tabletop role-playing game. The mechanics, it's not a D20 D&D Pathfinder kind of game. It uses something loosely based on Powered by the Apocalypse, so actions have results that are either full success, full failure, and something goes catastrophically wrong, or somewhere in the middle where something goes your way, but there's a cost or a difficult decision to make. And like most tabletop RPGs, this is usually resolved with dice. Spencer Stark, the creator of the tabletop RPG Alice is Missing, I've heard of that one, but I haven't read it yet. On a lark, they or one of their fellow players got the portmanteau phrase idea of Beyblade, Blades in the Dark, Beyblades, Blades in the Dark, Beyblades in the Dark, and somehow got this hybrid phrase stuck in their head, and it kept rattling around in there until they decide, screw it, let's do it. And I don't know if they're family folk and their kids had Beyblades, and that's how they had access to this or maybe even got the idea for it. But they got this set up on their table. There's a tweet from Spencer Stark showing a video of an action resolving. They didn't use this for every single action that they did, every single die roll, because that would have gotten tedious. Apparently, one Beyblade clash, I don't know what a Beyblade match is called, could take as much as 30 seconds, and that's a lot of time to spend effectively rolling dice and watching them spin until they stop rolling. So they used it on sparingly on specific kinds of encounter actions or really capstone dramatic actions. But the joy and tension in their voices as they're watching these two little basically tops go at it is almost like watching a bunch of people crowded around a cage match or a wrestling match. It's kind of spectacular. And it just goes to show all the different tools that you can use to tell a story. I mean, as I've said, and as any of you know, if you play an appreciable amount of RPGs, tabletop RPGs, but most of them use dice. But this one, they decided for a lark to see how it worked to swap out Beyblades instead of dice. And you've got other examples of this in the gaming industry, even professionally. There's an RPG called Undying by Magpie Games, and other games have done this as well. I don't know which one came first, but they use the same pass-fail partial success system that I just described for Blades, but you cash in chips to determine the success level of your action. You can take the fail and gain a chip, you can get a full success and spend a chip, or you gain nothing but lose nothing, but you get that middle of the road partial success, which kind of flattens the curve, eliminates all the randomness of the dice because you're passing back and forth a discrete resource and you know how much you have at any time, but gives more control to the players as they're deciding how their actions impact the story. Dread is a horror game that uses a Jenga tower to simulate the building tension, with actions being resolved by pulling bricks and placing them on top of the tower, just like standard Jenga rules. And if the tower falls, that character dies a death appropriate to the situation. Maybe they get shredded by a werewolf, maybe they get turned into a zombie, get lost in the woods and kidnapped by a shadow monster, whatever. They're out. An RPG called not Lovestruck, Starcrossed. Starcrossed also uses the Jenga tower to build tension, but it's romantic tension. That's an explicitly two-player game where they build this relationship. I haven't played that one yet, but I'm going to get around to that, at least reading the book. I'm trying to think of other examples of just out there things that people have used for raw game mechanics. What's his name? Jim, I can't remember his name. Give me just a minute. Jim McClure. Jim McClure, who is famous, notorious for inventing new rule systems for every game he makes. He doesn't recycle any of his mechanics. He's always looking for not just new iterations or innovations on old ideas, but new systems altogether. he did a freebie RPG. You can find this online called the Terrible RPG, but it's Tear-able. The Terrible RPG. Your character exists on a sheet of paper, and on one side you've got the character name, and I don't think there's even stats. I think there's just the character's name and a basic, like, one phrase description of who that character is. On the other side of the character sheet, it's blank. You write in a number of skills. I think it was 6 skills when I played it at con. He was there to run it for me. For the group. I was just happened to be there. But you write the names of your skills, and it can be as broad as firearms, or it can be as specific as omnipotence or ribbon dancing. These were things that actually came up in the game that I played. When you take an action, you don't roll dice, you don't cash in chips, you tear off a piece of the character sheet, hence the Terrible RPG. And I'm trying to remember how it worked. This was 3 or 4 years ago in St. Louis. Fear the Con. If you haven't, which is run by Fear the Boot RPG podcast. Check them out if you're not familiar with them. I think if you tore off a chunk of paper that wholly included at least one letter of the skill, then the action succeeded. But if you've ever tried to tear a piece of paper in a way that wasn't clean down the middle, you know it's hard to get fine control over that process. And once you start tearing, you can't move your fingers at all. You just have to keep tearing until a chunk is gone. So, of course, the first time I try to do something, what do? I tear my sheet almost perfectly in half. And instead of losing a little corner of my character sheet, I lost half of it. And so I really put a handicap on myself. But that was one of the first actions of the game. That was part of the learning process. And it was a comedy game. Brazenly comedy. Like, the scenario we played was a thinly veiled parody of Big Trouble in Little China. But that just goes back around to all the different mechanics and raw materials you can use to dictate the outcome of an RPG action, not just dice.
What are we talking about
Phoenix
here?
Dawn Command. That's another one.
The alternate gaming.
Well, the article was alternate gaming, not just mechanics, but raw materials other than dice. Because this person ran a Blades in the Dark session, but for some actions, use Beyblades, because it was a pun, Beyblades in the Dark, to do some of the actions. And I was just trying to think of the myriad different materials that get used to do game mechanics.
Well, like Dread.
And I forgot a really obvious one, cards.
Well, there's cards, like
that came up,
Dawn Command. Dread is Jenga, basically as a mechanic.
Mm-hmm.
We reviewed something a few weeks back where your cat got to play a role-playing game with you, and depending on how the cat acted was how you did the mechanics. So that was fantastic. I love that. You know, get your cat involved. I mean, obviously we've got a lot of cat people here with the show. So yeah, that's another way they've done it. There are several, like what they call diceless systems, where just telling the story determines the outcome by everybody kind of coming up to a group concession thing, like Diceless Marvel, where they also in experience, instead of getting experience points in that one, you got quote lines. So every descriptive quote lines that improved your character, and that was what you earned as experience at the end of that Marvel Diceless game. Now, I'm not a huge fan of that kind of Diceless system, but it shows you the versatility of being able to use things. When we used to play Dungeons and Dragons and we didn't necessarily have a place to roll dice, we'd pull chits out of a bag or use things like dominoes instead of dice.
Mhm.
Board games use spinners like the Game of Life.
Dominoes as an RPG mechanic would be interesting.
Yeah.
Creating a literal plot line and then building on it with like numbers or different numbers.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, and there's so many ways to determine random events. When you do live action role playing games, you often use a version of rock, paper, scissors to determine the outcome of activities.
Yeah, even the one time that I LARPed at Gen Con, they had I didn't know what the game mechanics were. We just acted most of the time. But the
Right.
one or two times we did need to randomly resolve an action, it was a deck of cards, and you flipped a card, and like if it was black, if the card was black, you succeeded. If it was red, you failed.
Right? There's so many ways to do that.
And some games take the random element out of it entirely. I was telling the folks about a game called a vampire RPG called Undying, which works broadly along the lines of Powered by the Apocalypse. You know, there's success, failure, and then that middle ground, kind of win, kind of lose. But you, instead of rolling dice, you have a bank of plot points, basically. And they don't give you a skill bonus. They literally dictate, like, you can gain a
You can,
plot point by taking a miss on an action, or you can spend a plot point to get a full success, or you can hold, take nothing, lose nothing, and get that middle result. So it
so
gives a lot more control over pacing
you can
while
merchant the
making sure
story.
players or GMs can't overdo it.
You can merchant
Yeah,
the story. You have to just determine what's most important to you. If this part of the plot line is not super important to your character, you can go ahead and give up this one in order to get that plot point to spend later on a much more vital encounter to get
yeah.
that
Or if you
also
think that
important
in this
clue.
situation a failure would be more narratively interesting. Some of the most interesting things that have ever happened to my characters happened as the result of failures.
Oh yeah, that's why I loved when we played with Keith Baker in his Eberron campaign, because he would have us describe
Mhm.
our crits and our fumbles, and when we got to describe our fumbles, that was the most interesting part of the game.
Mhm.
That time when I misfired that uh, fireball underground, you were in the game, and I decided that
Oh
instead of hitting
god,
the
yeah.
enemies, I hit the support structure holding the whole freaking cave together and now buried us. But it was
Nice knowing you.
hilarious, right? But it was hilarious.
Yeah.
Those are the kind of games. Those are those moments that you talk about for years after the session. Because this was year
So in the unlikely
5.
event yeah. In the unlikely event that you're interested in using Beyblades as a task resolution mechanic, there's a link at the bottom of the article to the drive-through RPG page. It's free to download, so you too can play gothic supernatural horror and resolve your actions with tops,
Right?
shiny tops.
A dreidel, basically. It's a very Jewish role playing game. You use a dreidel. But I mean, another
I mean, there's at
interesting,
least one, Dream Apart.
right? And there's another game I used to play called Disc Wars, where basically all the characters were discs, and the discs were different size. And instead of like measuring because of the war game aspect of it, you would flip the disc from side to side to side to move. You get so many flips was how far that character could move. But also when you attacked, you brought another disc and you flip it up in the air, and then everybody it touched when it fell were the ones hit by the attack. So it was very much like a Pogs meets role playing game slash combat strategy game. And I still have I think it's the Warhammer or World of Warcraft, or one of them's Disc Wars on my gaming shelf. But it was an interesting thing to do because you would buy your army of discs and you'd use them, and that was an alternate mechanic. That's the thing. There's all kinds of new mechanical ideas under the sun. Look at most of your quote unquote drinking games, where you decide to drink when someone says a favorite line on a TV show or something of that nature. You could do the same thing with a role playing game. Have a favorite um, show that nobody's seen that episode on in the background, and use certain phrases that they say in the show to determine where you go next, or successes and failures of the next action. It just wouldn't work real well if somebody has seen that episode before and memorized it. But it's great if it's like a premiere episode nobody's had a chance to see yet. So there's lots of ways you can go about it, and it's great. All right, so we've done a couple of topics from you there, there, and let's see, what was my next one? Okay, before we get into the CW verse, I had a couple of side things, and we weren't going to even do the CW this week. So we're going to do the couple side things, then we're probably going to end. We got 30 minutes. First off, the Level Up Advanced D&D Kickstarter is over with. If it finishes loading, I've got a black screen. Come on now. There we go. It did end up breaking 700,000 pound sterling. I believe that's the pound sterling, not the euro symbol. But I could be wrong.
Yeah.
So it did beat 700,000 pound sterling, which means it unlocked pretty much every stretch goal I think they had, including the extras that they added later on. I did end up at the last minute going ahead and getting a wizard backing, which cost me about $81 US. That gives me a PDF of all 3 of the core books plus the starting adventure. I just couldn't turn it down. For someone like me, this was worth it. And I agonized over whether I could afford to spend the money with us moving and stuff, but I went ahead and did it anyway. I'm going down to the stretch goals here to see, but I think we made every single stretch goal they had, because the stretch goals were based in the pound sterling, and I think we were just shy of 1 last time I looked, but I think we beat that one.
If anybody's curious, the amount of pound sterling they made on the Kickstarter equals 940,000 US dollars. So they almost broke $1 million.
Yep. And
that's impressive.
Yep. The last stretch goal was 600,000 pounds sterling, and we beat that with 100,000 to
handily.
Spare. We beat it with 100,000 to spare, and they were only looking for 30,000 euros as the backing. So that was over 20 times that, about a little over 23 times as much as what they were asking for is what they brought in. So this is going to be a phenomenal product, I think, with some great digital support. Now, I don't get to take advantage of all the digital support and stuff because I didn't get a high enough backing, but I at least get the PDFs, which is, to me, the all-important thing. Says I like to read the books. I mean, I really would have loved to have gotten the collector's leather-bound set just for collector's purposes. But, I mean, it's not like I can take it with me when I go, so... But, I mean, those look really, really nice.
They do.
They do. The golden boss with the 3 different leather covers. They're just the different colors, but it looks really, really professional and collector quality. And I would have loved to have had them, but in no way could I get to a backing level of that in good conscience. Not with getting ready to move and everything. We're still on track, hopefully, to be moving by the 29th. The appraisal just came in to our loan people. It actually appraised for less than what we were asking, so we're going to probably end up paying less overall. We just got to find out what the final ironing out is, because we had pledged originally 125,000, but the way the appraisals work, they're locked in. If it appraises for less, then they can't sell it for more than that, and it appraised for like 112,000. So really the only thing that's in question is whether we end up paying closing costs or they do. Because originally our closing costs were rolled into what was getting through our loan, and now it may or may not hold up to that, which means we might have to come up with closings out of our own pocket, which could make things a little bit of a stretch. But that's more on me than you guys. Just a little update on my moving situation. But we're still hoping to be out of here by the 1st of, start moving by the 1st of December. And then December will be our last month here while we're moving everything. Then the other thing I was going to talk about other than this, because this one's over with, was reminded by you're talking about that, was it Cold War or whatever game?
Class War?
Yeah, Class War. Is Cards Against Humanity just came out with that being another one of them more controversial game companies that come out with their Climate Catastrophe Pack, which has got a bunch of different cards in it. And the big thing about the pack, though, is that 100% of the proceeds from this particular pack goes to the Coalition for Rainforest Nations, basically helping reforest our rainforest basins and stuff, so that we have enough trees to keep our oxygen level to a point where we can support life on this planet, which is always good. But it's supposed to have a few neat cards in it. I don't see the ones listed that were mentioned in the email. I don't see example cards. Oh yeah, they are also have the thing that can basically anticipate your area, how big you are in a crisis. You know, if you're going to be like totally annihilated or other, and if you're one of those cities that's going to be totally annihilated, they're going to give you a pity discount for the super fucked, basically.
We get 25% off.
Yeah, something like that. That sounds pretty good to me.
Unbearable heat, overall rating, pretty fucked. Unbearable heat, pretty fucked. Violent hurricanes, not that fucked. Endless drought, pretty fucked. Torrential rain, pretty fucked, ironically. Rising oceans, not that fucked, which, fair.
You know, and let's see, what else? Let me look at the email that I got, because it mentioned a couple of the cards specifically. There's one that says hot, pretty basic card. Human extinction and oh my god, we're all going to die. Very important cards, I think, in a game like Cards Against Humanity Catastrophe Pack. So I really think it says PPS. We ran the numbers of how badly climate change will ravage every city in America. Enter your zip code here and get 50% off if your city is doomed. I love it. I mean, to me, that's a great marketing ploy for Cards Against Humanity. And the total irreverence of that game is something not to be scoffed at. It's really a fun part of the game of its own. Like, I've backed Cards Against Humanity. I've got the base game, the first 6 official expansions, and I even did the 12 Days of Bullshit one year for Christmas, where they gave you at least 12 different things throughout the Christmas season, but it could be more than 12. And among those, it included both a black and a white card with your own name in it, to basically customize your deck, um, and some other themed cards, basically for the 12 years of, or the 12 days of Christmas and stuff. It was just another like expansion. I never got the big black box, and I haven't got a bunch of the other stuff, like Carps Against Humidity or any of that. But I played with those, and those are great. And it's just a great party game. If you've never played the party game, Greg can tell you, we've had entire cons taken over by this game, it seems at times. There was one year at Vision Con that during prime time on a Saturday, so like the 8 o'clock time slot, we had 4 different tables of over 20 people playing at each table of Cards Against Humanity, just to show you. That was the heyday year, I think, of Cards Against Humanity, when we were playing it like crazy. Since then, we've kind of, most cons have relegated Cards Against Humanity to the more after hours time slots because of its kind of irreverent twist that we don't necessarily want all of our kids to be involved with.
Yeah.
But if you ever want to play a kid's version of a game that basically is Cards Against Humanity, pick up the old Apples to Apples game from any toy store, because it's really the PG version of Cards Against Humanity, safe for kids, talk about much more lighthearted subjects, but the mechanics are pretty much exactly the same. And it just makes a great party game. If you've got a group of a lot of people, you want to get a game that can support a lot of people, Cards Against Humanity really has almost no upper limit. As long as you got more and more of the expansion decks of cards to make sure you don't run out of cards, you can have 20 or 30 people playing. Although once you get past 20, it's probably a good idea to split into 2 or more tables. But it's a whole lot of fun, and the more creative and irreverent you are, the better you do at the game, and you just kind of have to make a mind meld with some of the other players to get the best points. And scoring does not matter in this game. It's kind of like...
Yeah, it's an excellent game for learning what other people's sense of humor.
Yeah, it's like whose line is it anyway? Scoring doesn't really matter. All you won in that show was the right to read the credits. But here, we often had rotating score, rotating roster. People would leave their seats, other people would take their seats, and at the end, we just kind of see who had the most subject cards that they'd won. But there was never really a big deal about who was the winner. It was just like that was the most broken mind at the table, I guess, is what we would determine. Because the more broke you are, the better you are at the game. If you're a little unhinged...
I'm having fun. Yeah, I'm having fun reading the FAQ. Have you read through the FAQ at the bottom?
No, actually, I had not looked at this link. I had just looked at the email. Then when you mentioned that Class Wars, I was like, you know what? That puts me in mind of this, so I should bring this up. And but anything having to do with Cards Against Humanity, you know that they're going to sprinkle all kinds of great stuff in.
Allegedly, the United Nations asked them to make this card pack as a promotion for the COP26 conference.
Hey.
It says we finished the pack and this website, but then the United Nations got offended by the card, quote, sucking the farts out of a cow's butthole, end quotes, so they backed out. Like, what did they think they were going to get? It's Cards Against Humanity.
It's Cards Against Humanity. They are meant to be irreverent. I mean, in a world where political correctness and inclusiveness is the new watch phrase, and it's good. It is. It is good that we have the inclusivity, and we like to be. I would like to be just correct, not necessarily politically correct. Like, it's perfectly okay in my book to describe somebody if you're describing them by saying they have black skin, because that's a descriptor. It's not a judgment call. Just like I would say they're tall. If they're over 6 feet tall, they're tall. You know, if they're thin, I would say they're thin. If they're heavy, I'd say they're heavy. But they should just be descriptors. I mean, yes, there is some cultural stuff that you might put in there just for more exactitude. But Cards Against Humanity, on the other hand, gives you the freedom to not be correct in such a way to where everybody knows it's all a joke. Nobody is personally being attacked. So, like, one of the most, I mean, I get people all the time that are apologizing as they make their plays in Cards Against Humanity. Like the blank plus blank equals blank card. I've had people fill that out as white people plus black people equals brown people. And normally in the day-to-day thing, that would just totally have people up in arms with pitchforks and torches and everything. But here they realize it's just a joke. Uh, and it's nice to be able to laugh at ourselves and realize that when these no longer become major button issues, we're able to laugh at them. It's when they're button issues that they become harder to laugh at and more of a societal stain on our group morality. Um, and it's like, what is the last one? Where's the humor in climate change? If you don't use humor as a coping mechanism for the incomprehensible scale of human folly, then Cards Against Humanity is not for you. That sums it up right there. That last one sums up what Cards Against Humanity is. It's people who are using humor as a coping mechanism for the folly that is the human condition. And so in this case, we're basically giving people tacit permission to be rude and to be vulgar and not get people offended by it. Because everybody knows in this case it's all a joke. You know, and the biggest joke of all is the fact that it's, you know, some of this stuff is not funny. But the fact is, if we can laugh at it, we can cope a little bit better. Sometimes. We just have to know when it's a joke and when it's serious. And there's a lot of people that like to swing the pendulum way too far in the other direction.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one of the biggest problems with society today, is that people do have a tendency to overreact. They don't act, they react, and it's overreaction is as the earmark. That's why we need people like the comedians like Lewis Black and Christopher Titus and George Carlin and Robin Williams, the ones that are going to tell you how it is in a way that's going to make you laugh out loud, but also make you think. And Cards Against Humanity is another thing like that. In its own way, it's about as revolutionary a game as there is, and it's addicting. I mean, it's hard to have a game going and not want to sit down and join.
Yeah, well, it spawned enough copycat games.
Yep. I mean, and you know, you go to
and third party expansions.
Yeah, and the fact is, they make the print on demand free. They're not trying to make money off of it necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
They will let you print it on demand on your own cards.
Yeah,
no problem.
I used to have a print and play copy.
Yeah, a lot of people do, and they're one of the few companies that made their stuff print on demand free right off the bat, because they're not about making a bunch of money off this. They're about the fact they want to give people permission to laugh at themselves and the world so they don't cry. Basically, because if you can laugh, you can cope, and that's it. And you know what they say sometimes, the saddest person of all is the clown. You know, what was that country song? Inside pocket of a clown is a sad place to hang around. You know, the Harlequin is the one that he uses his face paint and his happy-go-lucky jester persona to hide the fact that he's one of the most angsty people out. But if you can use that comedy to make your life just a little bit easier, why not do it? And better yet, if you can use that comedy to make somebody else's life a little bit easier, why not share that kind of
I
joy?
wasn't I wasn't familiar with that song. I was just thinking of the Pagliacci joke.
Yeah, well, Pagliacci was, of course, one of the most famous Harlequin clowns from
Hmm.
Italian opera. But no, it was, I think it's Joe Diffie that does it. It's inside the pocket of a clown is a sad place to hang around. Uh, I being a music file like I am, even though country's probably my least favorite, country and hard gangster rap, I still know enough about each genre of music that I can usually find a song for almost any situation. uh, but then again, my D&D class in real life is the bard. I'm the musician and the entertainer, and teaching people to laugh at the folly of things is like part and parcel of why I'm here. So
I guess somebody's
anyway,
got to.
somebody's got to do it. We've got to have the George Carlins and the Christopher Tituses of the world to make the rest of the world, bearable. We got to have the Weird Al Yankovics and the Cletus T. Judds and the Ray Stevenses of the world to make the other stuff have more meaning. You know what they say: once you have had Weird Al Yankovic parody your song, you've made it in Hollywood as a musician, and that is a saying. I mean, you've never truly made it as a musician until Weird Al Yankovic does a parody of one of your songs. That just shows you what kind of power humor has. And we value humor in the nerd culture, I think, more than a lot of the more straight laced cultures are that we like to poke fun at, which is ironic because we are taking our humor another step and poking fun at the humorless. Uh, you can't take life too seriously, but there are serious things in life that you do have to recognize as serious. It's just a dichotomy that you got to be cognizant of. But anyway, I think that's mostly what we have for our show this week. We missed Lurch this week, but he'll be back next week. Greg, you'll see him tomorrow at 10 a.m. on Queen City Cardboard playing one of his games on his channel. He
Yeah, and
streams.
it'll be a special time tomorrow because my partner Diane is off work, so we might get to play something together, and maybe she'll get a pick of what to do and see how that goes.
Two-player couch games. Those are always fun. Lurch has been looking for some of
Yeah.
those to play with his girl. So that could be fun when you can find a good one that you can sink your teeth into, especially with all the different tastes there are in games. It's hard to sometimes find one that matches both. But so come to Queen City Cardboard on Twitch, and you'll see Greg tomorrow at 10 a.m. And Greg mostly on Thursdays runs this show from 10 to about 1. Gives you about
Mm-hmm.
3 hours of a lot of storybook games, Steam games, Humble Bundle games are ones that he likes to play.
I
He also,
strongly considered pressing on with To the Moon last Thursday because it was just so good and I was so into it. But it was minutes to 1 o'clock, and I just finished Act One, so I was like, you know what, the game is telling me to pump the brakes.
yeah, but that means he can always do another episode of that later on. You never know.
Absolutely.
And so that's where you'll catch him. And then next week, if you go to Holdfast Brewing Company, in addition to being able to enjoy some wonderful microbrews and some great food, Greg will be there with some medium entry level games. Usually nothing that takes more than about an hour to play at most. Most of them are like 15 to like 30, 40 minutes to play. They're starter games. He might have a couple of middle ground games that could take as much as an hour, hour and a half tops. for people that really want to sink their teeth into something after playing a couple of the intro games. And then you can grab a puzzle and a team of people and you can try to do the puzzle race. See who can put this puzzle together the fastest for the group. And they do that, I said, every third Wednesday of the month over at Holdfast Brewing Company. And if you have any
And,
suggestions for our show here, you can tell Greg and he can pass it along to us.
and just last week, I bumped into Caleb Stokes and Spencer Harris from the Mix Six podcast at Holdfast, and Ross Payton from Role Playing Public Radio. So they're out and about. So maybe I'll manage to rope them into a game or two,
Yeah, you never
and
know
you
who
can
you're
meet
going to see.
more local heroes
Yeah, because,
who are much better at the job than I am.
don't sell yourself short, Greg. Uh, we're getting more and more out there as things are going on. The numbers for COVID are kind of up and down, but little bit more and more we're starting to involve people again, which is why we've got a scheduled date for next year's for game. Um, so if you are one of those that wants to go out and do the face to face thing, go see Greg over there at Holdfast. You can catch me at this channel. I'm still not regularly posting anything other than game time. Although this last Saturday I did do the stream for Extra Life. I didn't really get a lot of takers in my channel, but throughout the whole year I've raised $181 for Extra Life, and every dollar counts. And over 10 million was raised nationwide uh, to date for this year's Extra Life campaign. So that's a great thing in and of itself. For those who don't know, Extra Life is part of the Children's Miracle Network. It was started by a DJ who went by the moniker Doc, kind of like how I do, who had seen this girl in the hospital with stage 4 leukemia, and he had asked her if there's anything he could do to make her stay better and stuff. And she wanted just something to keep her occupied in the hospital, books to read, games to play, things like that. And he put a call out, and so many games and game consoles and board games and stuff were donated that not only were there several of them given to her, but they were given to some of the other long-term children's patients. And she lost her bout with leukemia, unfortunately, but it does eventually happen. But from that was born the Extra Life campaign, and it is gamers specifically supporting these kids who have different medical conditions, and they can help with lots of things. Not only do they help people get board games and card games and stuff to keep kids occupied, but they help pay for research on different conditions. They arrange for things like entertainment, like storytellers or magicians or ventriloquists to come in and entertain the kids. Or if the kids might be mostly hospital bound, but there's a chance they can come home with certain, concessions made, Extra Life and Children's Miracle Network will come together and work with them to try to facilitate that. If it means going in and putting wheelchair ramps in their house and bracer bars in their bathrooms or other things. And it's not always these big, huge conditions either. A child was born with an unusually flatter head than normal, which didn't cause any immediate concerns. But as the child grew older, the development of their head and their brain and everything would have been affected by the shape of their head. And they had insurance, but it would not cover a special helmet to treat this head shape. Extra Life came in and bought them the helmet, even though even though they're fully insured, the insurance didn't cover that particular elective treatment, and so they went and helped with that. It's also done things like help research in prenatal uh, heart monitors or blood pressure monitors for premature children. Can't use a regular blood pressure monitor because the children are so small that it would basically especially if their limbs aren't fully formed, could crush the bones when it pumped up to inflate to read their blood pressure. So they came up with special prenatal ones just for premature births and stuff, and that was done through funding of Extra Life. Just to give you an example, an Extra Life exists all throughout the United States and Canada. And so I did my stream, and my stream specifically, the Gamer Seuss Twitch stream, is always dedicated to Extra Life. What basically happens is when I get a payout from streaming for all the advertising and stuff that they do, and they pay me out as an affiliate, I immediately take half of whatever that payout is, and it goes to Extra Life. And the other half goes to any maintenance expenses and upgrades and software renewals and things to keep my channel going. But 50% of it is immediately Extra Life's, and that's where a portion of that $181 came from, was last year's payout. I have to make at least $100 to get a payout, and I'm like $5 short. So 2 subscribers, and I will get another payout, and that's another $50 that'll go to Extra Life. So if I can get 2 more subscribers in time to register by the end of December, I can start out next year's Extra Life campaign with a $50 fresh in the account. But I don't take a profit from my channel. My channel is just to update and maintain my equipment and software to do my channel. And everything else is pretty much going to Extra Life or sitting there to cover any unknown expenses that come out in the channel, but I don't make a cent. And that's kind of how it is with Eclectic Endeavors too. We don't take any payroll for what we do for the game and the picnic at the end of the universe or anything. We're not paid at all. We're all 100% volunteers, from the board of directors down to the lowest henchman. The best we get is like a henchman gets a t-shirt and, entered into a couple of drawings at the convention itself, but we don't make any profits, because all the profits from our endeavors that we pay for our expenses go towards furthering the nerdy arts. And what we're hoping to do with this last bit is to fund after school programs for high schools and middle schools and stuff involved with the nerdy pastimes, whether you might have a miniature painting club or an anime club or Dungeons and Dragons club that might need some funding, and you petition us for it, and we would take out of our profits and try to provide for some of them. We want to help as many different groups as possible with this kind of funding, and that's what we do here. All of this for us, and Greg will agree, is a labor of love. We're not doing this out of any kind of obligation or pay. And it's the same thing when we run our Twitch channels. Greg is playing to play and to enjoy time with his friends and stuff, especially when we were all locked in during COVID. We started streaming as a way to still get involved and touch bases with the people that we care about and care about the same things we do. And that's really what we want to do. But we'll be back next week, 8 p.m. Central Standard Time, our second to last episode for 2021. And then follow that with the Wednesday right before Thanksgiving, when hopefully all 3 of us will be back. We'll be saying our final goodbye to Greg as a permanent host. But like I said, he's still welcome to come in anytime he's got the free time to guest host on the show, and we'll always welcome him as one of the original founders of Game Time. And we'll start the new year off right after we take December off, probably with a big media blitz, handling a whole bunch of this new media stuff that hit us in November and December, as we get chances to watch some of this stuff. So our first show in January will probably be mostly reviews of media. We do, of course, love to cover our CW shows. We love to cover our Marvel shows as they come out. And we love to cover our new movies that are especially from the nerd standpoint And I've always got a recommendation from the vault or two that I'm willing to throw at you in my 50 years of having watched movies and TV obsessively as a nerd. So you never know what I might throw at the vault. Every once in a while, I even recommend a book or something, you know. And I'll probably take over recommending board and card games. We won't have Greg. But I do a lot of my collection of board and card games is just about as big as Greg's is. So we're both heavy duty gamers. So we'll get it covered no matter what. And if we don't see you before that, or any of those other times, we will catch you here. Well, we will catch you at the Springfield Expo Center in October for game. Have a great week, everybody. Try to keep the nerdy vision alive, and may all your rolls be 20. May all your fumbles be epic. Game over.